Welcome to the Y2 Fitness Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron O'Connell, and today I have an amazing guest. I have Matt Tumas of the Timothy Initiative. How are you doing today, Matt?
Doing awesome, man.
So just a brief little overview. You could probably explain it a little bit better, but the Timothy Initiative is all about disciples making disciples, and it's answering God's call or Jesus's call right at when he is about to depart earth, saying, go out and make disciples of the nations. And that is what the Timothy Initiative is all about.
Yep.
You guys are planting churches. You guys are empowering the people, making disciples out of disciples. That's pretty much what's happening, right?
Yeah, it is. I remember the first time I heard David Nelms, the founder of TTI, he said this to me, and it messed me up. He says, if you're making disciples who are not making disciples, then you're not making disciples. Because disciples make disciples. And I was like, oh my goodness. I just thought if I taught people and I helped their life be transformed, that was a disciple. But if you look at all the disciples in the Bible, it's like, go make disciples, teaching them to obey and follow all that I commanded you, and it multiplies. So that made me really think about it. It's more than just teaching somebody or telling somebody, but it's equipping them to do the same. That was pretty powerful.
Well, and you would have to think when you see something awesome, you're like, hey, there's a rocket about to be exploding in my backyard. You know, if you're over by Cape Canaveral, or you're a little kid and you got your own model rocket, you got this amazing thing. What's the first thing you want to do? You don't just hold that in.
Right.
You go and get all of your buddies and go, yo, this amazing thing is about to happen, or it just happened. Come on, like if you think of a movie, a meteor comes in and explodes, you go get your buddies, you're like, whoa, and then the next thing you know, the whole town's there, and then the media is there. When you really love something, when something's really interested, when you know you have the thing, the person that can literally change the world, when you can finally personalize that, who wants to hold it in?
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to.
Yeah, we don't have the flame and put it under a behind a bush. We don't do that. We let it for the world to see, and that's what you guys are doing with the Timothy Initiative. The stories that you've told me already up to this point are amazing. How you've got a process down, all that stuff, and that's really what I want to dive into today. But just to first start off, what's your story? How did you get involved with the Timothy Initiative? What were the steps that got you there?
It's a long story. I'll give it to you the short version.
That's okay. We have all the time in the world.
So part of it is my stories. I really grew up in Papua New Guinea, which is a little island down by Australia, hanging out in the South Pacific. And it was when I was about 16 years old that I joined the singing and witnessing group. So at the end, I'll sing you guys a song. No, I'm just kidding.
I was like, wait, what?
No. You don't want to hear me sing. I joined that just because I wanted to do something that mattered, and they put up with my singing. And so we would go out and we would set up in anywhere, a high school or a market. We'd set up and we'd sing, gather a crowd. We'd share our story, share God's story, and then we'd go out and talk in the crowd. And I remember the first time I did that, I was scared to death. We went to this place called Bugandi High School. It's kind of like a delinquent or a juvenile detention center. And we were supposed to just go in and out, not be allowed to talk to anybody. I was like, good, I'm good with that. Because I'd never actually shared the gospel with somebody who didn't know God before. So somehow the headmaster liked our songs and our little stories in between so well. He's like, hey, listen, all of you guys, and there's maybe 100 of those high schoolers, and there's like 15 of us, and they said, listen, you guys don't have to go do your work chores for the next hour and a half if you guys want to stay and talk to these guys. So I'm in Papua New Guinea. These are like, tattooed up, muscled. Yeah. I'm like a little 16-year-old with no armpit hair. I'm scared to death. My buddy and I have this little Bible tract, and these 15 guys with beards and tattoos like around us, and I'm like, have you ever seen this before? And I'm literally shaking. And so I read this little Bible tract about like the Romans Road, and I read through it, and at the end I'm just terrified, and I say, does anyone want to make Jesus the Lord of your life today? And I'm literally shaking. And these 5 guys said yes, and I said, okay, let me understand. This isn't just like a magic potion. This is, you have to make him the Lord of your life. And so I went into and explained it. And so then three of them like, that's what I want. And I was like, okay, the rest of you guys, high five. See ya. Let me talk with you guys. And so then I explained it a little bit more. And this guy goes, listen, I've never heard of hope before. If this is real, I'm all in. I was like, oh, awesome. So I prayed with these guys. And we said, hey, listen, I don't even know how to get you a Bible. Like, we weren't even prepared.
Yeah.
But I just remember walking, and these guys, one of them was like, literally had tears going down his face. And I'm going, it was the worst presentation of the good news of Jesus ever. I was shaking. It was that. But God's Spirit was there. And I was like, oh my goodness, like, as long as I'm faithful. I had been trained. It wasn't like I just kind of went on the whim. Like, I had practiced, I trained, but, anyway. And God transformed his life. The coolest part, which was really transformative in my mind, was a year later, we were in the same city at a hospital outside marketplace. And this guy afterwards came running up to me and goes, hey, listen, do you remember me? And I'm like, he's like, Bugandi High School. I was like, no way. He says, listen, praying that prayer and making Jesus Lord of my life transformed my life. I got out on good behavior. The three of us got Bibles, like you said, and we started reading the Bible together. And our lives have been transformed. Thank you. And I just started weeping. I'm like, I don't even know what I'm doing. I just said yes to what God did. And from that point on, I've always played sports my whole life. I played tennis and volleyball in college and got a scholarship, all that stuff. But there's not a single match, championship, anything that compared to that moment where I was like, this person's life was completely transformed by God's power. By me just saying yes, even if I didn't do a beautiful job, I just was available and said yes. And from that point on, nothing else mattered. I mean, I literally was like, I don't care if I make much money, I don't care about anything. Whatever I'm doing, I'm going to do it to the best of my ability for God's glory. But all I want to do is have the opportunity to help other people find hope in Jesus and find freedom and transformation. And that's what it's about. From that point on, nothing else mattered. All that mattered was helping people find hope. Yeah. And when you do that, living for God's so much more exciting.
Yeah, that's exactly why I have this podcast, is to help people transform, see it in a worldly way, a physical way through fitness, yes, but we're also here talking about spiritual fitness. Yeah. But that we're here to see transformations of lives, to give them hope, because so many people, not only in the gym, their own lives, we're in the Western world. Let's be real here. And in the Western world, we care about that fitness way more than a lot of other places in the world. But that's why I have become like others in hopes to win others for Christ. So I want to speak their language within fitness to be able to help them do essentially what you're doing as well. But like you said, nothing else mattered. And it became a point, not that you dropped playing volleyball. It's not that you dropped doing these things. Right. It's just you then started learning how to then spread God's story, your story, being able to transform lives in the midst of doing your life in the very beginning. And that's why this podcast here today is happening, because that's what I want to encourage our listeners to, our viewers to be able to do that in their everyday life. But who knows, maybe spark another person that wants to do and become someone like you. So you started getting that bug, let's just say, that Holy Spirit fire burning in you, and you're like, nothing else matters. So then where'd it go from there?
I went to college, graduated college, actually, and came down to Florida and had, young person dreams of changing the world by playing volleyball and reaching people on the beach, and didn't realize how difficult that'd be. Because on spring break, I'd come down and I could hit the ball really hard and people like, whoa, and then you have conversations and we'd lead people to Christ. I'm like, I'm going to move to Florida, be a waiter, and just lead people to Christ. It's going to be awesome. And then the real world hit. When the real world's not spring break, right?
Yeah.
And so it was difficult. But I used the gift that God gave me. I wasn't the greatest athlete, but I could hit the ball harder than anybody else. And so as a result, it was something I enjoyed. It's something I loved. And God used that as a way to build connection and relationships with others. So I think the Bible says, whatever you do, which means probably the things you like to do, right? Whatever you do, work at it with all of your heart. Not to please others, but for Him. Yes. And when we do that, so I just was like, listen, this is something I'm good at. This is something that God's gifted me at. I'm gonna train and be the best I can at it. And in the process, it's not about do I win or lose? Obviously you try, but it's about how do I play on the court? Who am I on the court? And how can I use that as a springboard to build relationships and connect with others? And very long story short, from that, my buddy Scott and I played a lot of volleyball together. We used it as a way to try and reach our friends, and we couldn't find a church we could bring them to, because it's really hard to find a place that accepts somebody who's messed up and broken right where they are without any judgment. And if you find a place like that, then you rarely find them speaking truth, because it's just like, and then you can go places where they truth bomb all the time, but then they're a bunch of Jesus jerks, you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And but that's no good, because then before they even find who God is, they're already turned off. So anyway, we literally accidentally just started a Bible study to have a place to invite our friends so that they could be loved where they were at, but at the same time lovingly hear truth, because then transformation and hope comes. And so the blend of those two came together, and the Bible study grew, and then it became a church, and then it kept growing, and then from there, it was like the dream job with working with my best friend, helping to reach people for Christ all over South Florida. It was amazing, but I still grew up on the mission field. So we go on a mission trip to Mexico, we go on a mission trip to Haiti, and I was like, how do we help these people? These pastors were hungry, and they just didn't know, they didn't know how to train it. So I literally spent one day training some pastors, like, man, this is more important than the building you're building out there. And I'm like, what? No, you guys could never afford that. Like, this is what we need. And that's what awakened my heart. Literally, just by God's grace, I just started hearing more about the Timothy Initiative and training pastors to raise up ordinary people to be disciple makers, to reach their people. And from there, I just started having conversations, and eventually left up my dream job here at Journey with my best friend so that I could help equip pastors in primarily Latin America, and Timothy Initiatives all over the world, but to train them how to literally take ordinary people like Jesus did, fishermen, normal people, to be able to share their story of how God transformed them in a way that connects with lost people, so that they'll want to hear God's story, the gospel, and then from there immediately know how to disciple them from there. And so it was a journey, and then I had to take that leap of faith of going, okay, I'm going to leave everything I know to go raise support and train pastors. But it's been an amazing journey, and God's faithfulness has been so cool through it.
That's fantastic. And I want to back up just a little bit, because there's a couple things you said. You said you met, your good friend Scott, which now is the head pastor at Journey Church, where we're actually sitting right now.
Right.
They just hit their 20th year.
Crazy.
They're just transforming the land all over Palm Beach County, but then even further into it. But also, I like to just showcase that it's like, hey, we all have our own different missions. Don't get scared of like, oh, I don't want to get into spreading the good news, because then God might call me to Uganda or wherever, That's not always somebody's call. It can be within your group of moms. It can be all that type of stuff, because Scott has an impact, not only online now, of course, but all throughout Palm Beach County through his church. But then you guys just broke up your different ways, because God used you in that season to build this church with him. And then into that next one. But I also liked what you said, is you met them lovingly where they're at. Because like you said there, people got that so wrong. Before, it was all about truth. When all the tracks happened, all that stuff, the Bible, the Christian, at least the Christian world here in the Western, was all about truth. It was hit you over the head, beat you down, rules, this and that. And it was all about truth. And then somewhere in like the late 90s, early 2000s, maybe a little bit earlier on that, we switched over to all about love. And we dropped the truth. We dropped the truth, and it was all about acceptance. And you can't really have love without the truth, because God is love, but he is also the way, the truth, and the light. You have to have both. But too often, you can't lead in going in there with truth. No. Because a lot of people don't even know what sins are.
Right. And nobody really cares what you have to say until they know how much you care about them. Because, there's a lot of people saying, and nowadays it's almost more difficult than ever to know what is true. Like, you listen to the news, you're like, I don't even know if that's true anymore. Like, that's their version or their view that they're propagating. So again, even more so in this generation, truth is so much more subjective. Not that truth is, but it's harder to discern what is really right and what's wrong. So truth isn't going to lead, but truth connected to reality and connected to love. But the only way someone's even going to listen is if you but hopefully have proven that you're reliable, that you're credible, that you're genuine and you love them. If you genuinely care for someone, then you're like, well, I'll listen to where they're coming from. And then from there, then you're like, oh, yeah, now I want to hear what you're saying. And then I think you just have to test everything. Does this fit the reality of the world we live in? If it doesn't fit reality, then it's not true, whether you like it or not.
But the crazy thing is, like you said, in this world now, truth means so many different things. When I launched my course, I did a beta course of I think there were 68 people in there at first. And I no longer am doing this course now because I'm turning it into a book in a free app. Cool. So I can give it away, so I no longer have to charge for it.
That's awesome.
But in the beginning, I talk about truth right away.
Yeah.
Because if we're going to agree to what the best plan for you is, we better agree what truth means, because we got to say it truthfully is the best plan for you.
Yeah.
I'm talking more than half, like 2/3 of the people that I had in that program dropped off at truth because they either believed everyone has their own version of their truth.
Right.
A lot of people actually believed that the truth changes over time. And they would give me examples like, well, look at the medical world. What we thought was true back then, we've proven that it's not true. I'm like, well,
then it wasn't true.
Then it wasn't true back then. They're like, no, the truth changed. I'm like, no, because if you think the
viruses
truth
do the same thing back then as they do now.
Exactly. If the truth changes, then you could find what's best for you now, but then a feeling could happen later and be like, oh, this isn't the best for me anymore. And that could have been a lie from the devil, Don't lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Christ, Jesus or God, and he will make your path straight. But it's just so crazy that we are in that time of world where truth just is all over the place. And you said truth is reality, and reality is the thing that is. And I break that all down, and I'll have a podcast actually about it as well. That's awesome. One of the personal ones that I was going to be doing that I was mentioning, because it's so important to be able to understand that there actually is a truth out there. I believe all of us want to believe that, but then the devil comes in and lies and goes in there. But if
you try to mix things together, there is a difference between a preference and a truth. There are certain things that are true. Like this table, it's here. It's true. I could prefer it not to be here, but it's not going to change it being here. So there's certain things that are real and true, and then there's certain things that are preferences. And when you try to say preferences equal truth, then you're right, people's truths are different, but that's because it's not a truth, it's just a preference. I prefer chocolate ice cream over vanilla because vanilla is boring, but other people have a different view, but that's not about truth. That's what we like or don't like. And
a lot of people also will relate truth with their reality, but reality is actually your response to what truly happened.
Right.
That becomes your reality. Sure. This truth happened, you responded in this way, whatever that may be, and then you created these results. If somebody responded a different way because they had a different paradigm, they created different results, same stimulus, but those both are reality. Reality is you can be stuck in this rut that it has a mind, your mind is going in a weird direction, and you put so many connections, neural connections in there that it becomes your reality that anytime blank happens, you cry. Whatever, and it's true, but it's not true that it has to happen. Right. Because then there's all these other things, but we digress a little bit because I'm sorry, but we want to really, like you said, lead out in love, and that is the greatest thing, because we know that if we can speak with a silver tongue, if we can have all the elegance in the world, if we can be giving, we can do all those things, but we don't have love, we have nothing at all. So you got on with the Timothy Initiative, and what did that start looking like for you? Like you said, you gave up everything. You gave up everything. Like what were the first original challenges that happened?
The first was I was working in Latin America, and I'd never learned another language in my life.
Okay, yeah.
And so trying to learn a language was my first challenge. So we, as a family, actually moved down to Guatemala for about 4 months.
So you took your family?
Yeah, the whole family
Okay,
went to Guatemala.
So the first challenge was actually convincing your wife.
Oh yeah, that was a long time beforehand. Because when we were first dating, she's like, "I want you to know, I know you're a missionary kid, but if you want to be a missionary, just know that's not the way I feel God calling me. I'm willing to obey Him wherever He wants." So I was like, "Oh boy, this is gonna be fun." But before we did anything, it was always, this is where we're going. Even my family, my kids, I was like, before we do something, they don't have to say this is what I want to do, but they have to say this is what I'm willing to do.
Yeah.
And because I think forcing them to do certain things isn't part of it. I just was like, God, if you're calling me, you're going to have my kids and my wife all be on board with this. So that was part of a journey. Yeah. But they are like, all right, this is where God's leading. And then it's a whole nother story of how my wife came on a trip to Haiti literally last minute to see us do a little bit of disciples making disciples, just to see if it'd even work before I even joined. And God just lined up so many things that at the end of it, it was just like we woke up at 5 a.m. when we got back, and she says, I don't think it's a matter of whether we should or we shouldn't, it's are we going to be obedient? She says, so I know. And that was, again, that confirmation, not just me feeling it and praying through it. It was a year process, fasting, praying, talking to Scott, different things. Yeah. And then same thing with my kids. So the beautiful thing is, it's not a rush. We just, one step I just think it's at one step at a time, being obedient. But then, so when we got to Guatemala, I realized that when I'm motivated, I can accomplish mostly anything I put my mind to. Yeah. Apparently not language.
That's hard.
It did not work for me very well, but
for some reason, because I'm trying to learn Spanish right now, and I found the best app. I found the Pimsleur app. I'm not sponsored by Pimsleur or anything like that, but I've been through Babbel, I've been through Duolingo, and for some reason, Pimsleur is actually somewhat sticking. Yeah. And I'm going through it, but still, I went over down to Ecuador on my missions trip. And everything that I learned, the moment I get put on the spot, goes right out. I sound like
a drunk 2-year-old. I know all the right verbs. I just say you did it yesterday when I'm trying to say I did it now.
But that's the issue, is like there's so much to it that it almost doesn't make sense because sentence structures are going back and forth. Yeah, like you go tell me, hey, this is how an engine works. I don't know, but there's these steps. I can learn those steps. They make sense. All these other things. You tell me to go do this.
Yeah, language is fluid.
Figure out this issue of how we can pay structure this with this little bit. There's a solvable thing there, but with that fluidity of language, it is hard. So anyone who knows more than one language is always my hat's off to you. Yeah. I don't, because I can only imagine what, if I keep at this, how long it will take as well. So that first thing was you found out there was that barrier.
Yeah, and then just getting a different paradigm. Of how to help pastors, because that's what we're doing, is helping pastors to equip ordinary people. Mm-hmm. And again, here at Journey, we started just, in a living room, and then and we just were reaching our friends and ordinary people. And so in my mind, it was normal. I may not have trained and equipped them to do the same, but they're being at least taught. Hey, go on mission. Hey, share with your friends. Hey, bring your friends. But a lot of churches, it's more just, hey, bring people. They thought evangelism or sharing their faith was inviting somebody to church. Yeah. Rather than actually sharing their story of transformation. And then once they shared their story, then being able to share the gospel clearly. Instead, it's like, hey, I'll bring them to church. The pastor will do that. Mm-hmm. And then unintentionally, pastors have been the answer for everything, especially in smaller churches in like Latin America. They got 30, 60, 80 people. Pastor has to do everything, every funeral, every this, every that. And so for the pastors to get the paradigm of, wait, no, I'm going to train people to do what I do, their natural mindset was, well, then what do I do? Yeah. Oh, no, you're mentoring, you're coaching, you're and so helping to break that paradigm in a way where it's, again, same thing, loving, not making them feel like failures. Because I remember after the first training, and one guy came up, he's like, man, I realized what I've been doing the last 30 years. I've been doing it wrong. I've been doing all wrong. And I was like, whoa, no. Yeah. You've been doing a lot of things right. There's one shift you can make, because you've been taking care of your people. You've been feeding, if you want to say spiritually, feeding them.
Yeah.
You've been protecting them from lies. You've been creating community. You've been doing a lot of amazing things. You just didn't teach them to go multiply. You didn't train them to do what you do. And so it's not that you've done all these things wrong, because now you're thinking, gather. And he's like, I feel like I've been building my kingdom, unintentionally thinking I was building God's kingdom. And it's really been all about me. And I said, well, it could be. That's an attitude, heart issue. But so helping them, so figuring out for me was, how do I help them see the reality of doing Jesus' model? He didn't travel the whole world. He literally never went, once he did his ministry, more than 50 miles from his home. And he poured into 12 ordinary nobodies, fishermen and young guys, right? And he spent the majority of time with them. He did the big groups, because they're like, oh no, only small churches are better. No. He spoke to the thousands, but he poured into and invested heavily in a few.
And he didn't go searching out for the thousands either.
No.
The thousands searched him out, and many times he tried to escape it, and then felt pity on them because
Like,
they said, "Oh, these people are
Yeah.
sheep without a shepherd." Right. Okay, let me go, because he knew that if
Yep.
he could just get those 12, well, he had his 3, his 12, and his 72.
Yep.
If he could get those people, because he modeled it so well, that is how it exponentially grows. You get these guys trained so well
that they know how to do it.
They know how to do it, but they then have the time and the ability to train as well, because they spend the time with those people. Well, then those people spend the time, and it just really models out. But you said something interesting, that here in the West, we unintentionally have made evangelism just bringing people into the church, which is noble. Don't get me wrong. A lot of if only more Christians would do that, we would be in a much
encourage to invite their friends.
We would be much better off.
Right, and I also think that part of it is, and I mean this in the nicest way possible, but there are certain churches I wouldn't want to invite a lost person or somebody seeking to, because they would come into an environment where they wouldn't be loved for who they are yet.
Yes.
And so I understand why some people wouldn't, but and again, being here at the journey for so long, I was maybe naive enough to think that all the churches had kind of become more like this.
Yeah.
And the more I've been out there, I was like, wow, there's some that are still speaking Christianese. They're not actually talking in a way that normal people talk. They talk about, hey, brother, come to the altar and all this. I'm like, what are you talking about? You don't even talk like a normal person.
Yeah.
But so I think part of it is people don't want to bring them, because then if they come, they're like, this is not going to actually connect with a real person, So that's part of it. But I think the other part is helping to equip people, because there's nothing more exciting. And that's what I realized. The other quote unquote thing that I realized personally was, I accidentally stole all the fun as the pastor. People would come up and they'd be like, hey, Matt, can you please, my friend is so close, I've been talking with him, would you meet with him? Because I think he's ready to put his trust in Jesus. And I'd be like, oh yeah, sure. So I'd meet up with them, I'd help him, and then I'd start discipling him, and I'd do this, and then I gave another one, hey, I got some friends and this. And so I did, but I never said, no, I won't do it unless you come with me.
Yeah.
You share your story. Listen, let me talk to you so you can share the gospel. I'll be there to help you. And instead, I just did it. So I got to see hundreds and hundreds of people over years give their life to Christ and see their life completely transformed. I thought I'd turn that off.
Sorry.
And so the bad part was, I'm trying to turn it off now, that I didn't let others experience that. Like, nobody could ever convince me, hey, what about this truth? What about this? And to show that the gospel's not real, or the Bible's not real, or God doesn't do anything today. Because I've literally seen healings. I've seen people's lives transformed from completely hardened to just completely transformed, the way they love and everything. And there's no way that you can manipulate it or coach them, self-help them through it. It's a transformation of the heart that is miraculous. Yeah. But most Christians don't get to experience that, because the church gets to see all of that. And the pastors and the staff or the leaders get to see all of the transformation, when we're all supposed to experience that. Yeah. And if I start to teach you, and then my goal, if you're my friend and you're not coming to church, I'm not saying it's good or bad, but I'm starting to pour into you because you're not ready, and I start to disciple you, and I realize your spiritual growth is dependent upon me, it creates this hunger inside of me to listen to the messages better, to, in my own time with God, listen better, to study and say, he asked a question about this, I need to understand it. And so it helps me grow. But then your excitement and passion as a new believer, like, God did this, and what about this? I just read this in the Bible. God loved me so much. He said, can you believe that? And I'm like, yeah, I've heard that 1,000 times. But your excitement's contagious to me. My knowledge, because I've been studying the Bible, to you is contagious. Oh, I want to learn more. And I think that's the way it's supposed to be. So many Christians have been following God for so long, sitting in church and heard the prodigal son 40 times this past year, that they're just like, yeah, they're good moral people, they have good morals, they do right things, they love people well, but they're kind of stale. Because they're not pouring out anywhere. But if I'm pouring out into somebody that's brand new, your fire I catch, my knowledge you catch, and it's this beautiful synergy of, hey, who are some friends you know that need to hear? And then I start teaching you. And so I think the beauty is, it's not a big shift, but it's just a little shift of, hey, listen, it's not you bringing your friends to church for the pastors to disciple. It's all of us on a team together reaching and being a part of it. So I think that was the paradigm shift that I had to help go, is how do you help pastors equip their people, and their people feel like they're allowed to do that on a regular basis, meeting with a small group. Because most pastors are running around training their staff. But what if they had a group of 10 that they poured into regularly, that they could equip to do what they do, and then eventually they could do the same? It'd be pretty awesome.
Cool. And Journey has great small groups, you know, better than a lot of other type of churches. But even still, if we were to just be bringing someone to church and that's it, they may fall on the one where, like just the other day, we talk about tithing. You know, and they may be walking in with a paradigm of, all church wants is my money, these pastors, this, you know. Granted, Scott doesn't take a salary. He does amazing, you know, and helps really keep the bars low from the barrier of entry low from the typical what a church has. But like, this is one of, if not the best, like one of the churches. Going to invite your friend into a nice little Pentecostal church, and you start hearing that person speak in tongues, those people are over there banging cymbals, that one's blowing the ram's horn, you know, and then the next thing you know, you're getting called out because someone does have a spiritual ability, and they're like, there's somebody in the room that's practicing witchcraft, you know, and you're just over there like, I literally, what? You know, you almost get scared, you know. So like you said, there isn't many churches, but I really liked what you said as well, of that synergy that you get. And so many times, from what I've seen and what we've even discussed, is people are scared to share their faith because they may not know the answer. But you said, hey, you said a really good thing, and what you've told me in the past is that is your opportunity to grow. It's a synergy thing. It's not, you're not going out there expecting to have all the answers, because when you do, one of the most loving things, because I've had to do this, when I go share my faith, when I go talk to somebody, and you get that person that is smart, that is intellectual, and goes, well, what do you say about this? You know, and you have no clue. The best answer at that moment is, I don't know. But then the most loving thing to do after that is to go home, research it yourself, get your answer, come back and say, hey, remember what you said and I had no answer? And because you didn't try to say, oh, well, you know, and try to think you knew everything. That right there is what love is. You took and dedicated your time to answer the question, not only on your own behalf, but because of that other person that's obviously struggling with it, which shows that you cared. You know, because we're not.
And it helps you grow because you're finding the answer as well.
Exactly, and it produces that synergy. But also, what you mentioned is that fire. I don't think I can, like you said, there's stale Christians, and I can be the most literary, know the Bible, read the Bible, all those other things. But I gotta say, when I led people to Christ, it's like a fire. But there's also truth as well, because of I used this example just the other day because it's just fresh on my head, from one of my small groups as well, because I got a group of guys that hold me accountable, all that stuff as well. is the woman at the well.
Mm-hmm.
And Jesus goes and tells her the truth. Surely you don't have a husband. You actually had 8. And the one that you're with right now isn't even your husband. And she went back and told everyone everything that he told me everything that I've done my whole life. Yeah. But they didn't believe simply because of what she said. They came and talked to him. Yeah. But they believed because they actually figured out who he was. Mm-hmm. They got the fire inside of themselves. And there's something different between when you all of a sudden get somebody that's broken, has no hope, has no anything. Yes, there's an amazing fire that happens when they first ask Jesus into their life. Sure. But it's so much greater when you get that month with them and you see them grow and you actually are confident that they didn't just say it because they were hurting and it was selfish, but you can see the fruit producing because now there isn't this if and but. Because you told me a stat the other day about the Billy Graham movement. What was that stat that of all the people that gave their life to Christ?
I don't think that was me. I don't remember.
It wasn't you?
No. I think you might have brought it up when we were talking, but yeah, there was a lot that didn't, and I think that what you're saying though is what's interesting is in the Great Commission that Jesus says, he doesn't say go convert people.
Yeah.
He says go make disciples. Teaching them to obey and walking alongside them. Yeah. And I think that that's one of the things that sometimes we skip. Is somebody may make that decision to follow Jesus, but now that's just the beginning.
Yep.
Because we have neural pathways in our head. We have past hurts. We got issues. We got literally like habits and things, and we need somebody to walk alongside us to help us to be able to be. There's certain things that instantly are transformed. I've known people. Yes. I have a friend who. He'd been an alcoholic for years, and a very long story short, in a church service, the moment he gave his life to Christ, and he got up to go walk forward to be prayed for and to kind of solidify it, he literally just started sweating like crazy. So much that he was soaking wet, and he was planning on his way out of the church because he just went to make somebody happy to come to church. You know? He's like, I'll come to church with you as long as you take me to a place to get alcohol on the way home. So the guy's like driving and he goes, hey, listen, where do you want to go? He's like, I have no cravings. And literally he was completely healed from that addiction. Man. And so when he sweat out, I think I just sweat out all the toxins. He didn't have to detox. He didn't have to anything. He says, listen, I knew that if I was going to get clean, I'd had to go through like detox for like 3, 4, 5 days. To
avoid the terrible,
right? Everything. He said none of that. But most people, that's not their story.
Yeah.
You know, and so you've got to walk alongside them through the process of that detox. You know what I'm saying? So this being a disciple maker is walking alongside people through the mess, through the difficulties. And I think if you read the New Testament, almost every one of Paul's letters is to a new church that he planted, and then he left, and then it's all of the things that they're trying to process through. Okay, Jesus changed my life. He's given me hope. The Holy Spirit's in me, but I'm still broken, and it's the process of becoming, fancy word, sanctified, becoming more like Jesus. We need each other to do that. We need someone to walk alongside us. We need the people who are more mature in their faith to help give us wisdom and advice from God's word, to break down the lies, to walk alongside. No, listen, you're having a hard time? Come over. I'm going to be with you through this. Yeah. So there's that community base that I think sometimes we miss in discipleship. It's not just, oh, let's convert somebody. Woo! Yeah. Let's help them find hope in Jesus, and then let's walk alongside them in their transformation process. And I think that's one of the things that Journey does a great job with as they do the freedom, and then they've got rooted and things like that. So it's not, and they train the leaders who go through it, and then they can be a leader, a co-leader. And so it's that same type of disciples making disciples. They go through it once, then they become a part-time leader, if you want to say, and then they can help lead it. And so it's that idea of modeling it, right? And so it's that process of doing that, not just, hey, we're just going to sit here, but it's being trained. There's a difference. I didn't realize, because I was a teacher for years, that there's a difference between teaching somebody and training somebody. Like, I can teach somebody how to shoot a basketball, but they're not going to shoot it right. You got to line it all up, and like I was a coach for years. There's a difference in then training them. because they may say, "Oh, I know what to do," but their body's physically not doing it. So I gotta, okay, let me hold your elbow in. Here's, nope, you shouldn't have the ball in your whole hand. You gotta have it on the, so you can train them, and it takes repetition over and over and over for a couple weeks before they start to break those habits. And that's just a physical thing. Same thing spiritually is that mindset of training somebody, so it's not just knowledge. I can know how to shoot a basketball, but I could never make it in the hoop. It takes practice and training. And I think same thing spiritually. And it may even be, as you're talking about, why people are afraid to share their story, because a lot of times someone might have that fire of being transformed and finding hope in Jesus, and then they go tell their friends, and they could do it in a way that actually causes more harm than good.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And then they're like, well, I'll never do that again. So they say, I tried that, it didn't work, but that's because you just went out there.
And they feel defeated afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, oh, wow, I did this and I feel defeated. It's like, well, I don't know if you put the whole armor of God on beforehand and went out there. Or just
even being trained. Like, I mean,
or being trained as well, exactly, of how to do it exactly. And because the parable of the seeds is real. Yep. There are the different seeds where, one
there
fell
on the grounds.
On the path that gets eaten up right away, okay, but then there's the shallow soil, which a lot of people will do. They'll come in for a season, and they're excited. They give their life to Christ. It shoots up type of thing, but it just all too quickly goes away. They experienced what it feels like to be around the Holy Spirit. They may not have really given their life to Christ, didn't. If they're on that path that gets eaten up and nothing, on that short path, but they got to feel it. It felt good. It was more of a selfish thing. But if only we as believers, the ones with the fruit that is multiplied, because this even applies to those that get choked out with the thorns and the vines, come along those people so it's not just a short-lived thing, and say, hey, yes, it's great that you gave your life to Christ, but let me show you how you do it, because like you said, it's more about the feel, it's more about their life, understanding what they're doing, because you can teach them all the right things, like you said, but the person that's shooting it like this because they got some weird kink in their shoulder, with an elbow way too in, opposed to the elbow way too far out, has two different directional methods. Yes, they know to be underneath it, but one has to go right, one has to go left. That's just talking about an elbow.
Yes,
and basketball. Coaching. Let alone everyone's life. The intricacies and complexities of somebody's life where they're dealing with alcoholism, they're dealing with anger, they're dealing with these things that so often will bring them down. They get the good news, they get relief, freedom in certain areas, but then they may need to be trained, not just taught to be this way, but trained how to get rid of their anger. They may need to be trained how to get rid of their lust. And it all ends up being different. That's why we need to sit there as disciples to be able to train them. But I would like to take this time to use a transition period to kind of help train, maybe teach, I guess, a little both in this right now, of a process to easily be able to share your faith with somebody, because there's a lot of literature how to do it. But from what I've understood, your way that you've taught me through the way the Timothy Initiative teaches it is the most effective way. Like for me,
it's a good way.
It's a I can't say most effective, but it's so natural. Because you can attack it from certain different ways. So I'll let you take the reins on
and
that.
I would even just jump back real quick to even Jesus talking to the woman at the well. The way he started it was he wasn't truth bombing her. No. He says, hey, can you get me some water? She's like, I can't even believe he's talking to me. Again, showing he cares, showing her value. And as she's getting the water, he asks her a question to get her thinking, hey, I could give you water and you'd never thirst again. Where can I get this water? Now she wants an answer, right? And then it goes on this journey that the whole story, but it's in John 4. It's a great story. But I think that's part of how we engage our friends that don't know him. Not just, hey, let me tell you something that you need to hear, but rather engaging them in conversation in a way to share your story that creates, I like to say, a thirst within them to want to hear truth. Because I could share my story with you, like we did a little bit in the beginning. I was a missionary kid, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
But that's just, Christians talking to Christians. But if I'm going to talk to someone that's not a believer, I'm going to share my story that's still 100% true, but I'm going to emphasize different things to connect with you. Does that make sense? Yes. Like, I wouldn't say I grew up in a great missionary home. My parents were amazing. I never got drunk. I never this. I never that. My wife and I learned, I'm not going to tell that story because that's not going to connect with almost anybody. But all humans, I think, have very similar basic desires in life that God gave us. Okay. And if I can share my story in a way that connects with you, but then also shows how Christ was a part of bringing fulfillment, it then makes you go, well, I want to hear a little more. And so that's kind of, so the basic, if you want to say, outline of sharing your story, you want to probably do it in like 2 minutes or less, because you could talk for hours, and some people may want to hear, but most people don't. Most people don't want to hear what color the couch was you're sitting on. But if you can share your story in 2 minutes or less, it's very simple. I would say, looking back, who were you before you made your decision to follow Christ? Yes. How did you find Christ? And I would keep that really short, which is different than the way I was trained when I was younger. And then, how am I different now? I used to, when I was in high school and I was trained, I was trained in the middle how I met Christ to give a 1-minute gospel presentation. But that often can lose people right off the bat because he's preaching and he's trying to convert me. And so especially this, I don't know if it's this generation or whatever, but I've found that it's actually better to tell my story and just leave it very ambiguous in the middle with the hope of hearing their story and eventually getting back to either me saying, hey, would you like to hear what it was that changed my life? Or, can I share with you how Jesus changed my life? Yeah. And then if they say no, we're done. I'm not pushing anything on them. And if they say yes, then they've just asked me to share the gospel. Yes. Right? It's wide open, but I've opened the door. So I'll just give you a very short version of a generic way. I change it every time a little bit, depending who I'm sitting on a plane next to or whoever I'm talking to that doesn't know Christ. I try to think learn a little bit about them, value who they are first, and then say what parts of my story are going to connect most with them. Yes. But in a sense, a generic way to connect with their heart. So a generic way, I would say it would be like, I grew up in a religious home. And it didn't matter how hard I tried, I never felt like I was good enough. And I just always felt like God was disappointed in me. And again, I felt like I was a good person, but I wasn't good enough. And then I started thinking, I hit high school and I'm like, I'm not the greatest athlete on any team. I'm not the smartest in any of my classes. I'm not the best looking in any of my, and I'm just like, so what's the point? I'm not the best or the greatest at anything. I'm just here. What's my purpose? Like, why am I here? And I started thinking, like, what am I going to do with my life? I don't even know if I want to, and then I had friends that were bringing me down, and I just kind of felt like sort of empty. Like, I don't know what the point of all of this is. And it was around that time that someone asked me a question. They said, that question they asked me, I didn't really have a good answer for. And what they shared with me was how to really connect with God, and it transformed my life. And from that point of actually having a genuine relationship with God and being able to say, listen, it's not about trying to perform and be good enough. It was a matter of, now that I have a relationship with God, He's in me, transforming me from the inside out. I started to become the person God created me to be. I started having better friends. I started encouraging my friends to be different. I found purpose every day that He's like, you're not just here. Every day, I have a purpose for you. And it's your joy and excitement to fulfill it. Yeah. And then I started reading the Bible and understanding it, and it came alive to me. And so for me, I felt valued by God. I felt good enough because it wasn't based on my performance anymore. It was based on what Jesus had already done for me. And then now I had a power, the Holy Spirit in me, to start to slowly transform me into who I wanted to be. Yeah. And so as a result, from that point on, man, every day, whether it's good things going on or bad things, I know God's got purpose for me. And it's been, every day I have hope. And so that's a simple way that I kind of share it, because most people in life are going to connect with, religion's empty. And if anyone ever says that, I always say I hate religion. Yeah. It was really, really funny. My wife's my wife's aunt was saying something, and she says, "Oh, I hate religion." And my wife's like, "Yeah, I hate religion too." She's like, "Wait a second, your husband's a pastor. What would he say if he said that?" She said, "He hates religion too." She's like, "What?" She says, "Go ask him." So she came and asked me, "I hate religion because religion is rules and barriers keeping people from God.
Mm-hmm.
Christianity is different. It's about having a relationship with God and Him then helping us know, hey, this is the best way to live and follow this. One, to honor me, but also because I've designed you and I know what's best." And so it's that relationship, that friendship with God. Now there is a standard, and that's sharing the gospel and all that kind of stuff. And if I come back to people, usually I leave that question in the middle on purpose. Because someone will often say, and then after I share my story like I just did, then I would say, "Well, man, what's your spiritual journey been like?" And then I just listen to whatever they say, ask questions and things like that. But often they'll say, "Well, what was that question that you didn't have an answer to?" And then that's an easy entry into, I say, "Well, it was actually someone that said, you know what, what's God's standard to go to heaven?" And I was like, I don't know. I came to say, Jesus? Well, why Jesus? Because he came to save us. Why? From our sin. Why? I don't know. I didn't really know. Because so often we're like, oh, Jesus came to die on the cross, save us from our sins. But why did he have to do that? Like, why did Jesus have to die?
Mm-hmm.
Because God's a holy and righteous God. And his standard's perfect.
Yes.
And you look at this world. When sin entered this world, what happened to this world?
Instantly, look at Cain killed Abel.
Yeah.
Instantly,
sin
and then
came like cancer, right?
And then right after that, he's like, "Well, if Cain is cursed, well, I've killed a man just for looking at me wrong, So if he's,
So once sin entered, it literally just spread like a cancer, and it corrupted. So why would God not allow sin into paradise, into heaven? Because it would corrupt the saints. So his standard to go to heaven, have a relationship with him, is perfection. Not because he's like some egotistical. It's like, this is the standard. Yeah. And so that's why none of us on our own have any hope. And so anyway, that I can go into an easy way to share the gospel. But the goal is, that's a whole other story.
Yeah, we'll get there.
But the goal is to share your story in a way that's relatable. Yeah. In a way that it helps people go, oh yeah, you know what? I don't always feel good enough. Yeah, no, God, I've always heard people say, oh, I could never walk in the doors of church because they're like fire and burn down, stuff like that. I'm like, that's so stupid. But it's ultimately what they're saying is, I'm not good enough. Yeah. And people don't feel good enough because even if on the outside I can look good, I know my thoughts. Mm-hmm. And my thoughts aren't always good. And and so as a result, people are like, nah, I'm not good enough, and I don't want to be a hypocrite, right? One of the worst things you could be called is a hypocrite. Yeah. And so people are afraid of, I don't want to pretend, so I'm not even going to try. Yeah. But if I help them connect with that area of, listen, I didn't feel good enough, I didn't that, and then now that I'm in relation with God, I finally feel good enough because of what he's done. Then the goal is to find a connection. Yes. To open the door for them to want to hear what God's done in your life.
Well, and everyone has that connection because they're already around the person they're talking to, because yes, you've gotten to the point, and you see it all the time, people in taxis giving their life to Christ. So that's two people from two different worlds. Yep. But most often we're immersed in our own world. Our coworkers, our gym goers, all that stuff, and I do the exact same thing because you've taught me, but it can. Because your version was you already were on that spiritual side. I see so often when you're doing something good, like you said before, work for like you're working for God and not for masters, you're spiritual masters, not for people. And that is God saying, like, do everything that you're currently doing to the best of your ability because I gave you that ability. And when you start doing that, whether it be in the gym, or wherever it is, as a mother, as whatever you're doing, you're the best HOA person that always has their head level. And like, how do you do that, Kathy? Whatever it may be. Yeah. But people come up to me all the time and will be asking, hey, what are your goals? Mm-hmm. How do I do this the best? Yep. How do I make this better, like in the gym? Right. And I take that right away, and I can insert my story and do a 30-second brief one, a 2-minute one. Yep. Because if you just ask me, what do I have goals? What are your goals? And I go, well, I don't have goals. What do you mean? Oh, well, my goal is actually to to be ready and capable for anything that God, the devil, or my life throws my way. Because I've had goals before, and all they did was just bring me down. You know, like within the gym. They're like, well, what do you mean? I'll be like, well, you see, and I'll ask them, do you have a goal? Well, yeah, I want to get big. I'll be like, I had that same goal too. But here's the thing. I kept getting bigger. I kept getting better. I turned a pro, and I was the worst off. I had no friends. I constantly was beating myself up, you know, and the typical problems of the gym goer.
Sure.
You know, I would never felt like I was enough, so I started doing all these things, and I got it all, and it was worthless.
Yeah.
And once I felt myself in that pit, when everything was throwing itself away, that is when, even though I knew of God the whole time, that is when I finally was like, you know what, I can't do it myself anymore.
Yeah.
Let me give it to Him. And then, you know, and then from there, everything started taking off. I now can be in the gym or not in the gym, and my mind's okay. I'm achieving goals still without having myself to the perfect. And you just say before, now.
Yeah.
But, you know, and I instantly start going into that type of thing. They're like, wow, and now I'm talking about Christ.
Yeah.
But it's also my irrefutable story that you actually asked me for.
Yeah.
You know?
You can't argue with someone's story very well.
You can't. And I just bring in that God thing to get the little...
Yep.
Because then I start asking them questions of like, well, what are your goals? What are these things? And you can then ask them, well, the question why is very powerful. Don't do it too often because then you're just berating them.
Yeah.
But you allow it to happen. Be like, well, what's the purpose behind that? Why are you trying to lose the weight? Why, you know? And they'll start going into their hurts and their pains. You know, and you can identify those
And
things.
the reason that they will go into their hurts and pains is because they can see you genuinely care.
Yes.
It's interesting when you genuinely care about somebody and ask questions that show that you've been listening.
Yeah.
People will open up because people want to be valued.
They're
longing for somebody to value them.
Yes.
And when you do that, people's like, I haven't said this to anyone for 10 years. I've never told anyone this before. And I'm like, oh my goodness, why are you telling me? I don't say that. But But it's because they genuinely know that you genuinely care for them. Mm-hmm. And as a result, they want to open up. And so I think that's part of the whole purpose of, before you try to share anything with anyone, it's not preach at them, it's not tell them this is right or truth bomb them, it's genuinely care for them, listen to them, and part of the way you can do that is sharing your story a little bit, hearing some of their story, but I think the reason they're opening is because you're being genuine. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying?
And I really like how you said, hey, leave a little question in there for them. We're like, hey, I had this question and I just couldn't get answered. Yeah. So then from there, you didn't even talk about the question. I like that because I think I heard John Maxwell say something that when he's in his conferences, he's talking about business and he'll be like, hey, I got 6 business tips that will revolutionize what you're doing, but I'm going to give you 5 today.
Yep.
And he goes and he's like, because the 6th one is just too much. So here's the 5. And he'll end up going through his whole presentation on all 5 or whatever. And almost every time, he says, they usually, like, if they open it up for questions, or they come to him afterwards, like, what is that 6th thing? Mm-hmm. What is that thing? You know, and you just create that thirst. He's like, well...
Yep, and
it's my relationship with God, you know, and it's awesome. Like they're introducing. I really like that. I'm gonna have to really think about ways to put into my story, you know, for me to get that additional thirst, just because I'm always looking for a way to be that much more effective.
Well, the reason I did that was because I was trained in a group of disciple makers,